The federal tax cut deal. What's an Ohio Democrat to do?
From the Battelle studio at WOSU at Cosi, this is Columbus on the Record. Joining Mike Thompson this week, Kathy Kandinsky, State House reporter for the Columbus Dispatch, Bill Cohen, State House correspondent for Ohio Public Radio, Michael Daniels, co-publisher of Outlook Media, and Mark Weaver, Republican strategist.
Congressmen and senators from Ohio are just as torn over the president's tax cut deal as their counterparts from around the country. Outgoing Republican Senator George Voinovich says he will vote against any extension of the so-called Bush tax cuts. Voinovich worries about the deficit. Sherrod Brown says President Obama is breaking a campaign promise to repeal the tax cuts for the rich. And Congresswoman Mary Jo Kilroy, who is also leaving office, says she is waiting for the final language before deciding. Michael Daniels, the problem is extending these tax cuts on everybody is linked to extending unemployment benefits. And that has put Democrats in a box.
It certainly has. I think that the Senate Republicans have done a really nice job once again of holding the country hostage to their very narrow agenda. And so as a Democrat, you're faced with the do you let unemployment benefits expire? And equally importantly, do you let tax cuts on the middle class expire so that the tax cuts for the rich remain? Obama has said that we have to be pragmatic about this, that Democrats can't stick and be ideologues, that this is the best compromise that we can get. I'm not so sure, and particularly for liberals and progressives like Kilroy and Brown, this is really painting them into a box.
Mark, is extending the unemployment compensation benefits for another 13 months, is that a fair trade for extending the tax cuts on everybody?
Well, politically it's a fair trade because you have to deal with getting Democrat votes. And Democrats will vote for that. Republicans will vote for tax cuts. But economically, none of this makes sense. Tax cuts work economically for everybody because when people have their own money, they invest it. And when they invest it in businesses, they grow and hire people. And those people pay taxes. And so they don't cost government money. They actually bring money in. Unemployment compensation is more of a political issue, which is you don't want to appear to be heartless to the plight of these people who've been out of work for so long and are legitimately worried about how they're going to pay their bills.
Now, economists will say unemployment benefits are spent immediately on groceries, clothes, doctor's appointments, medicines, but the trickle down of the upper income tax cuts is it's a trickle.
Well, it's not a trickle down, it's invested. I mean, these aren't people that don't take the money and put it in their mattress. What they do is they invest it. And when you invest in a company, it expands and hires people. And over the long haul, and if you don't believe me, believe John F. Kennedy, who was the Democrat president who put this in force and said when you cut taxes, it helps grow the economy.
Well, I think there's a valid debate about whether the wealthiest people will take that money and invest it in the same rapid fashion that you might see the money trickle into the economy with like unemployment benefits, as you mentioned. So I think it is a hard sell for a lot of Democrats over that issue of whether they need it, considering what it's going to do to the federal deficit and what it's doing to spending. Spending was something that all these candidates ran against, and yet I think this is going to blow about 900 million, billion, I don't know, who knows, into 900 billion.
The money doesn't come back by taxes because they do invest it immediately. What else do you do with it? You don't put it in your pillow.
The thing is, those on the left flank of the Democratic Party, they've been holding their tongues for 2 years now. They haven't been all that happy with Obama on Afghanistan, on health care and so forth. They thought he was too centrist, but they didn't want to criticize their own president. But now that this thing has happened, I think you're seeing kind of pent-up frustration and anger, and you're seeing, all these words like he's a sellout, and that's coming from Democrats themselves.
And I think you're exactly right. I think at the end of the day, what will Kilroy do? I hope she votes against it because she has nothing to lose. She's not going back. What will Brown do? Those people who are going to be running for re-election have it a lot tougher because at some point you're going to have to face the voters again, and these are by and large middle-class voters who are going to say, because you held out for some ideological cause, my taxes went up and my unemployment was cut off.
But they're obviously sending a message to their president that they're not happy, and maybe they will end up voting for it this time, as you say, but then maybe next time this kind of a deal won't be cut so quick and not include, everybody's, people that feel they're being left out this time.
Now, Sherrod Brown, as we tape this program on a Friday afternoon, Sherrod Brown said that he'd be willing to bring that threshold up to $1 million, so no tax cuts for folks who are over $1 million in income in return for cost of living increases for Social Security recipients. Mark, is that a deal
Sure,
Republicans
Brown,
will
he's
live
a
with?
knee-jerk populist. He's playing to the masses. The problem for Barack Obama is the Democrats are setting these examples and trying to offer new ideas that are different from what the president has put forward. And so he's moving into a cycle where he's hoping to be able to pin blame on Republicans in Congress. His first problem is the Democrats in Congress.
I think that his first problem is that you're exactly right. He's got Democrats who are putting things forward which are not what he promised, but the truth of the matter is that he's signing off on things that weren't what he promised. He's signing off on a whole bunch of stuff that wasn't what we on the left of the party voted for.
But Mark, is it a problem as he heads towards 2012 that he's tacking a little bit towards the center? Bill Clinton did the same thing with welfare reform.
Well, it's a problem in that it makes it more likely for him to catch a Democrat primary opponent. And so many people compare Barack Obama to Jimmy Carter, so much in common with him. Jimmy Carter had Ted Kennedy come at him from the left in 1980. Many people think that weakened him so that Ronald Reagan could come in and finish him off.
George W. Bush had Pat Buchanan come in 90.
George H.W. Bush.
George H.W. Bush, yeah.
Does he have a
92.
choice, though? I mean, does he really have a choice not to kind of move toward the center at this point after the election?
Oh, no, I think he needs to politically, but it's going to create vulnerability on the left.
Okay. Our next topic, Ohio will see its taxes cut even as the state faces an $8 billion budget shortfall. Governor-elect Kasich and legislative Republicans intend to let the last phase of the income tax cut take effect. If you recall, that's the tax cut Ted Strickland delayed last year. The governor-elect is also floating some budget-cutting ideas, among them privatizing the Ohio Turnpike, keeping some nonviolent offenders out of prison, and ending the practice of paying union wages on public construction projects. Kathy Kandinsky, John Kasich calls these ideas low-hanging fruit. Are they as easy to pick as he's proposing right now?
No, they're not going to be easy. I mean, collective bargaining is going to be a tough issue for him and the legislature to go after. But considering where we're at, we've got an $8 billion projected deficit in the budget. All these things have to be on the table. So, prison reform is something that's been talked about. Releasing nonviolent offenders into the community is something that's been talked about. I expect that to get serious discussion. A lot of the school folks have told me, primary and secondary education is anticipating about a 20% cut in state aid this year. So what they plan to come to the governor with is, okay, if you're going to cut our money, can you give us some more flexibility? And for them, flexibility comes in easing Ohio's collective bargaining law. So you might see those kind of trade-offs coming in the absence of money. But yeah, I think he's talked about prisons. He's talked about, of course, no taxes, easing on collective bargaining. I think any discussion is going to involve Medicaid, and we've already, of course, heard that primary and secondary schools are going to be cut, and a lot of people are expecting higher education to get cut as well. I think the whole budget's really on the table.
Sentencing reform is something that I think is low-hanging fruit in terms of getting it passed, because you've got liberal Democrats who say this is a great idea. You've got very conservative Republicans like Kasich and Bill Seitz in the Senate saying this is a good idea, it'll save money. The problem is it may be low-hanging fruit to get passed next year, although they didn't really get to a vote this year. But it's not going to save a lot of money short term. It could save hundreds of millions in the long term, but short term, no. For this next budget, they're still in a big bind.
Well, there's also political danger in some of this low-hanging fruit. For example, the sentencing reform. Bernie Madoff was a non-violent offender. And if he were to be let out today, there would be outrage. And the kind of people who might be let out might be the kind of folks who the public wants to see behind bars. So on one hand, the public wants to save money. On the other hand, when somebody rips off a bunch of old ladies of their money, not violently, but maybe through stock fraud, people want to see punishment.
And where are they going to be housed? What community are they going to be housed in? Are they going to be housed in your neighborhood, or where are group homes going to be located, or whatever they decide to do to house people? I don't know what it would be, but where are they going to be?
Kathy, you wrote last weekend about how the whole get on the bus or get run over by the bus line that the governor-elect has used, and folks are trying to get on that bus. They're trying to come up with ideas. Is a preemptive strike, perhaps, to try to lessen the cuts, or to try to work out a creative solution? I
think the mentality of a lot of special interest groups is we'd rather pitch our own ideas on how to save money rather than you cut us and you decide how to do it. So I think you're going to see a lot of groups come forward with their own plans. I think they're trying to feel the governor out to see where he is on some of these issues. I think they're meeting with their legislative leaders as well. But I think you're going to see some groups like the mental health mental health interest is one that's coming up with a plan right now that they'll take to the governor, and I think you're going to see others do the same.
Michael, the big fish is Medicaid. It's 40-some-odd% of the state budget. Right. They have to come to the table, I would assume. There's certainly going to be some cuts there.
They're going to have to come to the table, yes, and there are going to be some cuts there. I honestly think that they're going to end up taking a much bigger cut than they think they're going to end up taking. I was really kind of surprised at Governor-elect Kasich's saying, you know what, we're not going to delay the income tax issue for another year. We're going to go ahead and roll it out. It was one of those things that if we just delayed it, it really was one of those things I don't think would have caught a lot of press and would have been a way to put money back into the budget. It's an accounting trick. We all know it's an accounting trick. It was an accounting trick when the Democrat did it. But I'm really surprised that he threw that out there at the same time that we're talking about major agency cuts, and he's talking about decreasing revenues.
But all during the campaign, he said that tax delay was in fact a tax increase because Ohioans didn't get the tax cut they were supposed to get.
But we're after the campaign now. Remember the advice that I gave the candidates before the campaign was, as soon as the campaign is over, forget everything you promised on the stump and get practical.
So you're the one who's been telling me that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, our next topic. Before he leaves office, Governor Ted Strickland has a big task. He has to fill the Supreme Court vacancy that will be created when Maureen O'Connor moves up to Chief Justice. Governor Strickland has tapped his lieutenant governor running mate and former Franklin County Judge Yvette McGee-Brown to fill that post. Bill Cohen, there were other names mentioned: current Chief Justice Eric Brown, Richard Cordray, Kent Marcus, the governor's chief legal counsel. Why Judge Brown?
Well, I think it helps Strickland make history by appointing the first black female to the Ohio Supreme Court. I think a lot of Democrats like that. They want to see some diversity in that court, not just finally have a Democrat in there, although Eric Brown is currently a Democrat, but also to have a black woman. I think that makes them feel good. She does have some judicial experience, even though it's not the kind of high-level experience of deciding whether a law is constitutional or not. But she says, okay, I haven't decided those kinds of issues, but I've decided very important individual issues, whether to take a child away from their parents, adoption issues, whether to try somebody in adult court instead of juvenile court. So she insists she has the background to do it.
And she can win.
Win in 2012 is when she'd be up for election.
She can win in 2012. I think one of the things that she said when her name was being floated around was that she'd be interested, but that she would not accept the appointment if she didn't think she could hold the seat. And I think in this year with the way the Republicans swept everything, and the governor's race still was, we have to admit, close. She was one of Strickland's biggest assets on the stump. She's extremely popular among all Democrats and a lot of moderate Republicans. She can hold that seat.
See, I disagree. I've heard good things about her as a person. Some of my fellow lawyers know her, said she's a good person. I think politically she's weak. She will not play well outside of Franklin County. I think she did not help the governor this year. This was not a good pick.
Now she'll face a different electorate perhaps in 2012, much more Democrats coming in with the president on the ballot, and she's African American, the president's African American. Does that play into her chances of re-election?
Well, no doubt it's a different electorate. No doubt that certainly people of color tend to be more supportive of other people of color. But this is a big state. It's a diverse state. I don't think she realizes quite how big the state is and how hard it is to campaign 88 counties. I do not think she will be reelected in 2012.
I don't know. She just participated in a gubernatorial race. I think you kind of get an idea of how big the state is.
But the rap on her was she was absent without leave, and that she was only used in certain areas and getting around this state. As all the statewide candidates I've worked with, it's a surprise to them when they do it for the first time.
Will she be on the wrong side of a lot of 6-to-1 votes?
No, she'll be on the wrong side of a lot of 5-to-2 votes because Republican Paul Pfeiffer often votes like a Democrat.
Okay.
But yes, you're right. She will be in the minority a lot. And I asked her about that, and she said, well, that's okay. Sometimes a good, strong, dissenting opinion helps lay the groundwork for the future.
I agree with that, and I would rephrase the question. She's going to be on the correct side of a lot of losing votes.
Yes, the losing side, I guess, of a lot of votes. Kathy, other candidates. Richard Cordray, an attorney, outgoing attorney general, very smart. He apparently said,
he would have been a great pick, but evidently he's got some other ideas about what he's going to be doing in the next few years, so he wasn't interested. I think he would have been an awesome pick.
And Kent Marcus, good lawyer, apparently, or well-respected lawyer, governor's chief legal counsel, but there's been some undercurrents about you know, the troop brigades. And
I was surprised. I know Kent